Lou feeds Will, but accidentally spills it onto his lap, spotting a loose thread on Will's collar. She leans in and bites it off with her teeth. Since she can't afford to quit this job, Lou has to find every possible way to cheer Will up. Every day, she dresses in bright, colorful outfits. Whenever Lou shows up like that, Will's face fills with irritation. Those eye-searing colors always get on his nerves, and that's not all. On the very first day Lou came in for her interview, she suffered an embarrassing mishap. The moment she sat down, her skirt split open. Thinking fast, she tied her jacket around her waist and pretended she was hot. Just as Lou was relieved Camilla hadn't noticed, Steven suddenly walked in and warmly greeted Lou. Hello. Although Lou's resume was hardly impressive, the discreet way she covered her torn skirt actually made Camilla think more highly of her, so she stopped hesitating and hired Lou for the position. Camilla explained that the job was mainly to keep Will company, talk to him, and lift his spirit, but before opening the door, she warned Lou to brace herself. The creepy fake voice wasn't enough. Will also mocked Lou's dress. The almost insulting remark left Lou deeply uncomfortable, but her family's situation meant she couldn't turn down the job. On her very first day, Lou immediately felt just how cold and distant Will could be. She tried to start a conversation, but Will instantly hit the sore spot she wanted to hide. That unexpected rejection made Lou blush with embarrassment, but Will was still the person she had been hired to care for, so Lou didn't feel she could argue back. She could only endure it in silence, then hurry out of the room. The suffocating atmosphere quickly changed when two visitors arrived. Rupert and Alicia came to see Will. They kept beating around the bush and changing the subject, but in the end, they admitted they were in love. Because of that, they hoped Will would accept it and give them his blessing. In the 2 years since the accident, this was the first time Will had seen them again, but in his current condition, what else could he possibly do? Will could only bury all his anger and pain in a sentence that sounded almost calm, and let them leave. Suddenly, glass shattered in the room. Lou rushed in and discovered that Will had used his wheelchair to knock over every photo he had with Alicia. For someone who could barely control his own body, even the ways he could vent his anger were limited. But Lou thought those pictures were part of Will's youth, and that he had only acted on impulse. So with the best of intentions, Lou tried to repair the frame, but it was no different from rubbing salt in the wound. She carefully handed it back to Will, only to be met with his sarcasm. But right after that, Will's remarks became even more painful, and slowly turned into personal attack. This time, Lou couldn't take it anymore. For the first time, she poured out all her frustration at Will. The words she blurted out in anger seemed to strike a nerve, but Will still held his head high, and coldly told her to put the frame away, before turning his wheelchair aside. Lou had been through far too much that day. She had no idea how to reach someone as bitter as Will, so she texted Trina, and told her everything that had been weighing on her. Even though Trina gently comforted her, Lou still had to swallow all that bitterness, along with a cold sandwich. After that argument, Will's attitude toward Lou began to change. He slowly realized that his mood had been affecting everyone around him, and forcing him to reconsider how he treated people. Rain poured outside the window, mirroring Will's gloomy state of mind. He wanted to apologize to Lou, but his pride made the words hard to say, so Will chose another way. He asked Lou to put on a movie, then invited her to stay and watch it with him. But the way Lou searched for a DVD caught his attention. Will noticed that she always avoided foreign films. Lou explained that throughout the movie, Will secretly watched her reactions. The film ended with the main character willingly sacrificing himself. That ending was hard for Lou, who had become completely absorbed in the story, to accept. Will's smile wasn't mocking. It came from warmth and quiet satisfaction. For Will, after living with quadriplegia for so long, he had almost forgotten that feeling, both comforting and unfamiliar. Afterward, he asked to go outside into the courtyard, which completely surprised Camilla. In 2 years, this was the first time Will had wanted to go outside. Through their conversations, they came to understand each other better. Will realized that Lou's life up to that point had been peaceful, but almost directionless. Work filled nearly every day of her life, leaving very little time for herself. Today, Will was in an unusually good mood. Even Nathan, who was usually serious, couldn't help wondering what made Lou so special. Everything seemed to be getting better, but only Will knew that his health was steadily declining. Through his routine checkup, Lou learned that Will's condition could not be reversed. Behind the cutting words that hurt everyone around him were endless pain and helplessness. It turned out, Will had once held on to hope too. During the first year, he gave everything he had to rehabilitate rehabilitation, but in the end, only his right thumb could move slightly. Lou began to understand Will's suffering. That kind of despair was something perhaps only he could truly understand. The first snow of winter arrived, covering everything in white, and turning the castle into a scene from a fairy tale. But inside that castle, Lou was the only person with Will, when a dangerous fever quietly took hold. Because Will's body struggled to regulate temperature, even a slight chill could send his fever soaring, and lead to pneumonia. At first, the two of them could still talk, but before long, Will slipped into a delirious state. Lou had no idea what to do. She called everyone in the house, but no one answered. The situation only came under control when Nathan returned. He pulled back the blankets and removed some of Will's clothes, while Lou used a fan and towels to cool him down. It was then that Lou saw the scars from Will's previous self-harm. She was suddenly overwhelmed, so that night she didn't leave when her shift ended, and chose to stay and care for Will. While waiting for Will to wake up, Lou opened his computer, and found an old video of him. Back then, Will had been full of life, but those days now existed only in old recordings. When Will woke up, Lou couldn't hold back her curiosity, and asked him what had changed his life so completely. Rain was pouring that day. Will was rushing to a business meeting, when a motorcycle suddenly came speeding toward him, and crashed into him. From that moment on, he would never walk again. After hearing the story, Lou started to leave, so Will could rest alone, but Will insisted she stay, because if Lou now knew what had left him paralyzed, then in return, she also had to share a secret she kept buried. Faced with that request, Lou didn't refuse. She only hesitated for a moment, before her eyes drifted into the past. When Will asked why she no longer wore those special tights, Lou explained regretfully that they had been discontinued. That tiny flicker of regret in Lou's eyes made Will remember how much she loved the bumblebee tights. Lou stayed beside Will that night, and didn't leave for a long time. In the silence, as the night grew colder, the distance between them gradually stopped feeling awkward. On another day, Lou's unusual sense of style made Will curious. Lou smiled and explained that she had once dreamed of studying fashion design, and had even received an acceptance letter. But when she mentioned it, Lou hesitated, because she knew her family was struggling financially. That sense of responsibility forced her to give up school with a heavy heart, and work at the cafe for 6 years, even though she had truly wanted to study. This time, Will didn't mock her. Instead, he honestly shared what he thought. The truth was, someone who grew up wealthy like Will could never fully understand the financial hardship Lou's family faced. But Will didn't just talk about dreams, because later, he genuinely helped Lou pursue hers. To ease the awkwardness, Lou tried to change the subject, but when she prepared to shave him, Will changed his mind. Even so, his refusal wasn't very convincing, because his voice held more anticipation than resistance. With each pass of the razor, Will's face began to look bright again. Along with the beard, the defeated look he had worn for 2 years disappeared. Being that close stirred something in Lou she couldn't quite name. Lou was happy that her efforts were finally working, and even happier that Will was opening up. A smile she couldn't suppress spread softly across her face. Since becoming paralyzed, Will had almost stopped smiling, but Lou's presence was like a ray of sunlight, pushing back some of the darkness inside him. Sadly, no matter how bright that light was, it could not erase all his pain. Lou accidentally overheard Will's parents arguing. She had never imagined that Will was so determined to go to Dignitas in Switzerland. Lou's heart tightened, and she hurried out of the estate. To Lou, his family's acceptance of the decision felt like giving up on Will, but she also began to realize that this was a deeply personal decision, tied to Will's autonomy, and one that left everyone in agony. Lou told Trina about the conflict inside her. However, Trina saw things differently. She believed that if Will had made up his mind, Lou should ask Camilla for funding, to create a list of things he wanted to do, and help him enjoy the time he had left. If the present brought Will nothing but pain, Trina thought they needed to listen to him, instead of forcing their own wishes on him. Maybe along the way, if he rediscovered some joy in life, Will might reconsider his final decision. Even though her sister had a point, Lou still couldn't accept it. Lou decided to try her own way way to change Will's mind. From that day on, Lou buried herself in the library, learning about quadriplegia and appropriate support. Only by truly understanding Will's world could she have any chance of helping him break free from his despair. And so, a plan for new experiences began to take shape. Perhaps once they completed the list, Will would change his decision and rediscover joy in life. But when Lou presented the idea to Camilla, she objected. Will's health was too fragile, and she was afraid to let her son go out. Stephen, however, unexpectedly supported the plan. Their first destination was a horse race, but as soon as they got out, the wheelchair sank into the mud. Even though Will kept saying he was fine, Lou loudly called for help. Some kind strangers pushed the chair free. What upset Will most was needing help in front of a crowd. He could only try to stay composed under the obvious and furtive stares of everyone around him, but Lou was so enthusiastic that she didn't notice Will's expression change. Lou placed all her hopes on horse number 3, but one look was enough for Will to see a problem. Sure enough, when the race began, Lou immediately raised her binoculars and followed the horse she had bet on, but the result wasn't what she hoped for. Horse number 3 seemed to be there only to cause trouble. Will, meanwhile, looked at Lou with an expression that said he'd known all along. At lunchtime, they ran into another problem. A restaurant employee coldly told them the place served members only. She looked over Lou's simple clothes, then glanced at Will in his wheelchair. With a mocking expression, she told them to try a roadside diner. Will felt awkward and wanted to leave immediately, but Lou kept arguing. She had researched the place online and heard the food there was good enough to cheer anyone up, but by then, their good mood was gone. Before they left, Lou fired back with a sharp remark. Neither of them spoke on the drive home. Even so, Lou kept a careful eye on Will's feelings. She had unintentionally embarrassed him several times that day. Once home, Will blasted heavy metal to drown out all the frustration of the day, but Lou turned it off herself and pulled out 2 concert tickets she had bought a week earlier, though Will agreed reluctantly. The smile at the corner of his mouth gave him away. To attend the concert, Lou prepared carefully. She set aside her usual style and slipped into a striking red dress. Will noticed the difference immediately. A good companion can sometimes be like a guide, helping us move beyond our insecurities and learn to believe in ourselves so we can live our own lives with courage. Wherever we go, that confidence remains a color that belongs to us alone. Will smiled softly at the wordless understanding between them, and at Lou's growing confidence. The concert itself may not have been anything special to him. Only the tag rubbing against his neck made Will slightly uncomfortable. Seeing this, Lou didn't hesitate, even in the crowded hall, to bite the loose thread off with her teeth. As the music began, Lou's gaze started to drift, because she barely understood the music. Will's mind wasn't on the stage either. He glanced at Lou and smiled with quiet ease. He was genuinely happy that day. When night fell and they returned, Lou started to take Will inside, but he wanted to hold on to the quiet in the car and sit there a little longer. The reason was simple. A completely ordinary wish for most people had become, in Will's circumstances, something very hard to have. Without realizing when it happened, the familiar house had become a place that constantly reminded Will of the limitations he didn't want to face. From that day on, Will seemed like a different person. He even happily accepted Lou's birthday invitation for the first time. To love someone is to recognize what they need and know how to cherish them. Lou's sincerity made Will feel genuinely cared for, so in his eyes, Lou shone like a star and deserved every good thing. On Lou's birthday, everyone gathered around the table. For a moment, Will felt part of ordinary life again. Talking and joining the celebration let him feel the warmth of Lou's family. After dinner, everyone handed her their gift. Bernard's gift was a heartfelt blessing, every word filled with affection. Lou's grandfather gave her a photo album. Inside were pictures tracing Lou's journey as she grew up, from a baby into an adult. What surprised Lou most was that Will gave her the bumblebee tights she had always wanted. Will expected nothing in return, because for anyone, seeing the person they love smile is already the most precious gift. Lou's family couldn't understand why she loved those strange tights, but Will knew exactly why. Until then, no one had ever understood Lou so well, and no one had remembered every little thing she had shared. In that moment, Lou felt truly seen. The next day, Will helped Bernard get a new job. Lou rushed to thank him, but couldn't find words big enough. Will said he had done it so that one day, when Lou Lou wanted to spread her wings. Family obligations would no longer force her to stay. A few days later, Lou kept planning their next destination, but then, an unexpected invitation landed like a stone in still water, throwing all her plans into disarray. It was Alicia and Rupert's wedding invitation. Lou could clearly hear the uncertainty in Will's voice. He didn't immediately decide whether to go. Instead, he took Lou outside the castle. This was where Will had once shared his first kiss with Alicia. The invitation had brought that memory back. Lou didn't know how to comfort him, so she simply said it was certainly memorable, and it was also one of the most beautiful places she had ever seen. But Will explained that was only because Lou had never seen anywhere more beautiful. The peace of that moment remained intact in his memory, but his attachment belonged only to the past, so Will didn't want to ruin the memory he had always protected. Even so, there was one place he had to go: Alicia's wedding. But before the wedding, Will, who rarely received visitors, met with a man in a suit. He even secretly told Lou to wait outside. Lou immediately sensed something was wrong, so she searched the man's name online and discovered he was an attorney specializing in wills. Lou hurried to tell Camilla. They had believed Will was growing happier and had changed his mind, but instead, he was still holding to his end-of-life decision. Lou couldn't accept that choice, because Will's life clearly had more color in it now, so she planned a longer trip, hoping this journey would make Will reconsider. On Alicia's wedding day, Lou and Will arrived at the ceremony together. The room was filled with well wishes, but Will's heart felt torn apart. What he had lost was not only the love he once treasured, but also the independent life he once had. He could only watch the woman he had loved take another man's hand in marriage and begin a new life. Meanwhile, Lou was happily talking with the bride's family, and even had a few more drinks. But when Lou looked over at Will, her expression suddenly fell. At that moment, Alicia noticed Will sitting quietly by himself. She slowly walked over and thanked him for coming to the wedding. But in Alicia's voice, Will could still hear the awkwardness. To ease his discomfort, when everyone began to dance, with a little liquid courage, and boldly sat on his lap, she smiled, and said she wanted to give everyone something to talk about. A wheelchair didn't mean they couldn't dance, even with surprised eyes all around them. In that moment, Will gradually realized that his feelings for Lou could no longer be kept hidden. They left the music, and every watching eye behind, with only the freedom and joy of the quiet night. On the journey home, it was nearly dawn. When they finally reached the house, Camilla was already waiting by the door, and immediately came over, asking why her son had been out all night. But Will's smile said everything. He was happy, and for a while had forgotten the worries that always haunted him. But Nathan noticed something was wrong. He believed the long night and alcohol had worsened Will's health. Sure enough, before long, Will developed a high fever and was hospitalized. Lou did everything she could to cheer him up, but he no longer had the strength to smile. Nathan explained somberly that he had cared for Will for 2 years, and witnessed countless nights when Will cried from the pain, and spoke of dreams where he could run or ski freely down a mountain, only to wake and face the harsh reality. Nathan understood why Will still stood by his own decision, but Lou still couldn't accept that choice. To help Will rediscover a desire to live, she planned another special trip. Once Will recovered, they flew to Mauritius for a seaside vacation. As the first sunlight touched Will's face, his loneliness seemed to dissolve in the wind, because Lou was right beside him. They shared every small joy, from stories that made them both laugh, to the beauty of the natural world around them. When night fell, a fierce storm raged outside. Lou went to close the door, but Will wanted to keep listening to the rain. She carefully adjusted his pillow, then prepared to return to her room. Will softly asked her to stay. Lou said nothing, and simply leaned close beside Will, listening to the wind and rain with him. Their feelings continued to deepen. The next day, Will put on his commanding tone to give Lou a challenge. Although she kept refusing, he continued encouraging her to get in the water and try, because it was the first step toward daring to explore the world. On a night filled with brilliant stars, Lou walked across the soft sand and danced for Will, with a charm all her own. The sky was pitch black, and the night was deep and still, while the campfire gave off a gentle warmth. Their feelings for each other father became increasingly clear. All of those beautiful moments made Lou incredibly happy. She thought she had changed Will's decision. Overcome with emotion, the two of them couldn't stop themselves from kissing. But after the kiss, Will's expression grew tense again. He was fighting a fierce battle within himself, then quietly said there was something he needed to tell her. Lou assumed she already knew what he was going to say. Lou had given Will the warmest months he had known since the accident, but love still did not change his decision. Even though the outcome remained the same, the time he spent with her had still brought him great joy. There was no denying that those experiences had given Will many precious memories, but for Will, joy could not erase the pain, the medical complications, and the sense that he had lost control over his own life. The truth was, Will still loved life, but he believed the independent life he once had was gone. The way he said Lou's name showed how important she was to him, but even that could not change his mind. Will still held firmly to his belief in personal autonomy. On the way home, although they sat very close together, emotionally they felt worlds apart. Lou, usually so talkative, fell silent. She watched the blanket slip from Will, while she sat directly across from him. In that moment she still couldn't accept the truth. When the plane landed, Will's parents thought the plan had worked. Steven even suggested a celebratory dinner, but Lou refused. Lou turned and walked away. Camilla hurried after her. That sight shattered Camilla's last remaining hope. 6 months had quietly passed, but they had not changed Will's decision. The moment Lou stepped through her front door, she could no longer contain her pain. She had given everything she had, yet still had to face losing Will. At the time, Lou couldn't understand how deeply Will loved her, but his decision was not Lou's responsibility. He wanted her to keep building a life of her own, and Will believed he had the right to decide what happened to his own life. In Will's view, if life was only prolonged, without any way to live as he wished, he would feel his dignity and autonomy being steadily worn away by illness. That night, Lou sat alone in her room. Bernard quietly came in. He told her that once someone has made a decision, it is very difficult for outside pressure to change it. Their journey, however beautiful, could not guarantee the ending they wanted. All Lou could do was make sure she had no regret. Love does not mean making another person's decisions for them. After hearing her father's advice, Lou began to see another path. When she learned Will had gone to Switzerland, she immediately left to see him. The mountain scenery kept changing, and Lou's state of mind slowly changed with it. Before, she had brought hope and tried to persuade Will to live, but now, she only wanted to be beside him for the final part of his journey, so neither of them would leave anything unsaid. Lou gathered all her courage and opened the door. Once again, she appeared with her unmistakable style, immediately catching Will's attention. He didn't find her annoying at all, because this was Lou, the woman he loved. Camilla quietly left the room. Lou became her cheerful self again. Will asked her to open the window. Outside, spring was glowing brightly, but even with life blooming everywhere, Will did not change his decision. This time, Lou did not argue, though they disagreed. She and Will's family stayed beside him. Their presence was completely different from the loneliness he had endured 6 months earlier. Will had time to say goodbye, and still stood by his final decision. Lou rested her head on Will's chest, listening to his heartbeat. She tried to hide the tears about to spill, then spoke softly. Will quietly sang back the song Lou had once sung to him. Only Will knew how deeply he loved Lou, the girl who had entered his life in a cheerful dress and a slightly old-fashioned cardigan, wearing an innocent smile, like a streak of red across a field of snow. Perhaps even Lou didn't realize just how brightly she shone, though his heart was filled with longing. Though their love remained deep, time kept moving, and the final moment of parting arrived. With Lou beside him, Will died after carrying out his end-of-life decision. Every leaf in the world is different, and every meeting may one day be followed by a goodbye. A soul shines brightly because of qualities that do not easily fade. Following Will's instructions, Lou wore the bumblebee tights he had given her, and went to the cafe in Paris that Will had once mentioned. She ordered a strong cup of coffee, then quietly read the letter Will had left behind. Because he loved Lou, Will did not leave her his entire fortune. Instead, he thought about her future. With the means he had, he opened a path for Lou to move forward. Growing up means no longer simply waiting for someone else to guide or rescue us. Mature love does not force another person to change for us. It helps them live a better life. And with that, the story comes to an end. Although Will was gone, the words he left behind continued to travel with Lou, even though love could not heal Will's condition. Will the man who once had everything, and Lou, the woman so full of life, could not share a complete future together. The joyful days they shared became memories that would never fade. This is a tragic love story. They met at a cruel moment in life, and parted in a painful way, but for both of them, the time they shared remained one of life's precious gifts. Perhaps love isn't made complete by how long it lasts, and its depth does not depend on how it ends, because the journey itself is worth treasuring. In a finite life, with every step Lou takes, Will remains with her in some way. As Will once said, Lou became one of the greatest joys of Will's life because he met Lou. Will spent the final 6 months of his life with the color and intensity he once knew. Because she met Will, Lou saw the world in colors she had never known, and the beginning and ending of their story seemed to have been foreshadowed from the moment they first met.